Hey BookTube, it's Jackie. How's it going? If you're new to me, it's the first time you're seeing my face, hello, welcome to my channel. I sit on my floor and I talk about books. So that's why you're here, because that's what's been happening today. If you're not new to me, thank you for tuning in and the continued support. I really do appreciate it. So today for you, I have, as you can see from the title, a book review. I will be reviewing Love, Theodosia by Lori Ann Goldstein. I read this book about a month ago and I have been working diligently on this review because I want to do a lot of the historical research to see if I can validate a lot of the historical references in this. That's what's taken so long. So you guys waited long enough. Without further ado, please grab yourself a drink, have yourself a seat, and let's get talking about Theodosia Burr. Okay, so this is gonna be a little different than my normal reviews. I asked for some suggestions from some of the booktubers that I really respect, and this is one of the suggestions that was given to me, so I'm taking full advantage of it. So the first half of this video is actually going to be just a basic review, spoiler free, kind of my normal standard summary, what worked, what didn't work, things of that nature. But at the second half of this video is where I'm going to be gushing and just bragging nonstop about this book. So if you have not read this book and you would like to, the first half of this video will be spoiler free. I will timestamp in the down box below where the gush starts, and it will also be titled so you know when to click off this video so you're not spoiled for anything. But if you want to just watch the whole thing through, I would be ecstatic. That would be awesome. But I don't want to ruin anything for you. So please, if you've not read this book, when it comes to the gush part, turn it off, go read it, and then come back and watch it with me. So just a little heads up on that. So let's get into this. Book stats. This book is Lori Ann Goldstein's debut novel. It was debuted in 2021, and I found it at Barnes & Noble. I found it on a whim. I went to buy some books, and I found it, and it kind of was calling to me, so I picked it up. I'd never heard of her before, obviously, debut novel. I physically read this book. So this is the actual copy that I read. But I do feel that an Audible or an audio version or an e-reading version would still suffice for this book. I thought this book was excellent in its physical form, and so I think the other two forms would just add to its excellence. So any platform that you're reading on, I think people would enjoy this. And I personally gave this book 4.5 stars. Goodreads does not have a 5-star or a half component, so it says only 4 stars on my Goodreads, but I gave this a 4.5 stars. Why did I personally read this book? I chose to pick up this book because I was reading over 4th of July weekend and I wanted something kind of on theme for 4th of July, and this is set during the American Revolutionary time period. This is turn of the century 1800s, and I felt that was very apropos for the time, and the other Revolutionary War titles I already owned, I had already read. So I didn't really feel like doing a reread, so I found something new. And it also falls under one of my favorite genres. This book is what I would deem historical fiction romance. It is not historical romance based off the normal description of what historical romance is. There is just as much romance as there is historical fact in this book, so that's why I consider it historical fictional romance, because this whole book is about the romance between Theodosia Burr and Philip Hamilton, so I can't say it's not romance. I also bought it in the romance section. But there is enough history in it that you could put this in the historical fiction section and it would sell just as well. All right, summary. So as I said, this is the fictional love story of Theodosia Burr and Philip Hamilton. If you are not familiar with Theodosia Burr is the daughter of Senator Aaron Burr, and she was highly, highly educated for a female during the turn of the century, 1800s turn of the century. She spoke 4 languages, she was brilliant in mathematics, she was politically savvy, and she was extremely quick-witted. All of these are historically accurate about her as a character. So we already have in truth, a strong female character, and then she's made even stronger within the context of this book. Philip Hamilton is the eldest son of Alexander Hamilton, and he was, for lack of a better word, a rake. He was very much the ladies' man back then, and he thought more with his libido than he did with his mind. And that is based off what I can research pretty accurate as well from the stuff that I was able to find on him. In this book, he's made to be more of a tortured poet, so that might be a liberty that was taken. I can't really prove or disprove that, but he was a likable character. He was a lovable rake. We like him. The fathers, Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, the reason why these two people are famous is because they had they're Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. Aaron Burr was the first vice president under Thomas Jefferson and a senator during the forging of the Americas as we know it. And Alexander Hamilton was also a forger in that as well. And many people are very familiar with Alexander Hamilton now due to the famous Broadway musical Hamilton that features his entire story. These two men were bitter rivals in actual historical context and in this book. They are bitter rivals. So if this sounds a little familiar, we have a daughter and a son of rival families falling in love. It should be. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling. Usually I'm not a fan of Romeo and Juliet. I actually don't really like that story very much, but I loved the way it was used in this book. It was very, very well done. This is a classic enemies to lovers story as well, because due to the feud going on, these two children were raised with the idea that you are not to deal with the other's family. They are horrible. They're decrepit. They would talk smack about each other on both sides. So not only do you have this imbued sense of family loyalty on each side, you also have the fact that these two are highly attracted to each other. They've grown up together in the same area. So it has the makings of something awesome. And it was. It was great. It was definitely a will they, won't they story. Even though it was a Romeo and Juliet retelling, which we all know how that ends. This book definitely gave you this feeling of will they, won't they? I want this to happen, but I want this to happen despite what actually historically happens. I want this to happen. It was a really, really good time. I had a great, great time with this book. It was exactly what I needed at the time. What worked in this book? The historical framework. This book, from what I can find, is pretty historically accurate. The liberties taken in this book were taken at times that we don't really have a lot of history about. And the liberties that were taken were all liberties that, because they were taken during the gray areas, that's what I like to call the history that we don't really know. That's the day-to-day conversation, the day-to-day living. If it wasn't penned down and we don't have documentation of exactly what happened, this is like the hearsay history. It's like, it was rumored that they were at this party, but they weren't at that party. We're not really quite for sure. Multiple people say on both sides. That's the type of history that these liberties were taken with, not the actual concrete, factual, political machinations that were going on at the time that helped create a lot of these gray pockets, which I thought was fan-freaking-tastic. This is something that's really important to me in historical fiction because I was a history major in college. It's one of my favorite subjects. I love studying history. It's the basis of everything that we are, not biologically, so sorry. I've always felt that you don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. And that's why history is so important to me. So when it's used correctly, liberties are taken, but they're taken in a way that it's still respectful of the actual history. That is fucking phenomenal to me. And Lori Ann Goldstein did a fucking bang on job on this. She nailed this aspect of this book. It is excellent. Anybody who likes historical fiction, even if you don't like American Revolutionary historical fiction, I think will appreciate the way American history was utilized in this book and demonstrated and shown. I think you will appreciate it and I think you will enjoy it. If you don't like romance, you might not really enjoy this book as much, but you will appreciate the historical references in this book and how they were utilized within the actual story context of the fictional side of the story. So I thought it was great. Next thing that worked in this book was bringing Theodosia to the forefront. Theodosia Burr is one of those unknown women in American history. If you study American history, you've heard of her. If you haven't and you really don't go into it, okay, Aaron Burr's daughter. Cool. That's why she's famous. No, she's famous for a lot of other reasons. She was a pioneer for women. This woman, at the turn of the century, 1800s, was educated in 4 different languages, was politically savvy, could hold her own with any type of party. And yet at the same time, she could still play the little damsel in distress sitting on her little tuffet talking about theater and poetry. She could play both sides of the field, and she fucking did. She did very, very well. Aaron Burr, when his wife died, became her sole parent. And he raised her, a male in the 1800s, raised his only daughter to be a force to be reckoned with in politics. She stood by his side during his run as senator. The letters that are mentioned in this book where she corresponded with her dad, this is all historically accurate. She would write these letters and he would critique them and said, this isn't how you argue at this point. This isn't... It was great. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she was. There's not a lot of history on her because history is written from the perspective of the winner, and Aaron Burr really wasn't a winner. Well, he was, but you get my point. But her story is something that's really, really special. So for it to be brought out right in the forefront and all of these amazing qualities that this real woman possessed to be shown and displayed in this glorious manner was fucking phenomenal. I applaud Lori Ann Goldstein for that. She did a bang-on job with that. It just made me so fucking happy to have a female heroine who really did exist be just as badass in real life as she is in the book. Like, that's awesome. That shit's amazing. I love it. Fantastic. Great. Another thing that worked in this book is how it was written. Lori Ann Goldstein, the verbiage and prose that she used, oh, beautiful. Beautiful. She wrote this book the way people used to talk. And they don't talk like that anymore. If you've ever read the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, that is one of the most strong, in my opinion, it's one of the strongest passages I've ever read in my entire life. It says so much in such a little space. The words that are used, they convey strength, they convey hope, they convey this bright, shiny idea of future. And that's what Lori Ann Goldstein writes this book how. And that's how she writes this book. She writes this, she infuses this sense of hope and strength for this couple and this feeling of just anything is possible in this book. And it's fucking stunning. It is stunning. I'm going to read you a passage. Now, this is a poem that Philip Hamilton recites, and then the following paragraph. Devotion from the divine, must thoughts align. The skin lived in one, created by another, growing ever tougher. A coat, a shield, an armored breastplate, so thick, nothing to penetrate. Not life from without, not life from within. Why not, then a life of sin? For we strive and rive, hoping for that feeling of being alive. His words lingered in the air, settling on Theodosia's exposed skin, slipping beneath. Restrained yet strong, imbued with melancholy and delivered with sincerity that Theodosia could wager had never left Philip's lips before. She ran through all she knew, struggling to place the refrain and its author. If Theodosia could not name the poet, not a single woman in attendance would be able to. They think it was his, not one able to deny that he eclipsed Lucinda in her own trivial game. I love it. I love the poem, and I love the way she wrote Theodosia's mind. It was just, it was perfect. It was fantastic. I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed it. I've already mentioned that this is a Romeo and Juliet retelling. The fact that that was the retelling that was used to tell the story was spot on. Again, not a Romeo and Juliet fan, but it was the story. If you were going to retell a story, it was the story to reference. And she even does a little cheeky thing in the book where, let me get to the passage. It's actually really sweet, where she references it. Right you go, Lottie said in an unconvincing plea. With one more bow that displayed a tear on the side of his breeches, Philip obliged, assisted by the footman who plucked the vase from Mrs. Nicholson's with one hand and shoved Philip with the other. Such sweet sorrow. Philip's shout from the front hall, followed by the sound of a door closing shut. I thought it was very poetic that she actually quoted Shakespeare in this. Thought that was genius. Thank you. I love when people do that. I think that's great. That was a nice little Easter egg there. So Romeo and Juliet retelling, it was fantastic. It was well used, well implemented. You saw the homage to it, but yet she took it and made it her own. It was fantastic. The intimate scenes in this, they are not making you dripping wet. They are not in your face. They are not graphic. They are just enough. To quote my friend Shayla, who nicknamed this book a panty moistener, that is exactly what it does. It just gives you enough. It gives you enough to get you satiated till you get to the next thing. And it's, oh, those scenes, they're so beautifully intimate. They're not obscene. They're not graphic. I mean, graphic can be beautiful too. Don't get me wrong. It can be beautiful, but the language she uses, it's not even flowery. It's just like, it goes back to the verbiage. The words this woman chose for these intimate scenes, it just made my heart melt. It was great. Oh my God, it was fantastic. Because these intimate scenes are not just straight sex. They are the gentle touches, the gentle caresses, the looks, the paragraph she describes on the look on Philip's face when he sees Theodosia at one point in time in the book is just, I want a guy to look at me like that. My husband looked at me like that when I walked down the aisle, but that's about it. I want it more. I was just like, oh, it just kind of makes you jelly. And it was great. It was so fantastic. Oh, I applaud. I applauded it. It was fantastic. So if you don't want something that's extremely graphic, in your face, smut, you just want that hint of sex, you want that hint of intimacy, you want that brief little peek behind the curtain, there you go. That's it. All right. What didn't work? I want to preface this part. This stuff all worked for me, but this is stuff that I think other people might have a problem with, just based off of my past reading and past talking to people about what they like to read. Okay. This book is actually very slow to start. It takes some getting into to really build that romance up. But I think that's actually a beautiful part of the book, is because when that romance does finally take effect and you start to really see it, you've had that build up. You've had that time with the characters where it all kind of makes sense and it doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel insta. So I feel like the slow to start does work for it, but I know a lot of people don't like slow to start books. And with historical fiction, with as much history that's involved in this book, that might be a little dragging for some people. So just be aware of that. The development of feud between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. When we talk about the feud between these two fathers, it's mostly through internal monologue on Theodosia's part, because this is primarily told through Theodosia. Like, it's her point of view through the entirety of the book. So we only get bits and pieces of it. To really understand the severity of this feud, you have to do outside research. So some people just don't want to deal with that. So the idea of why these two feuding families hate each other, you don't really get a good sense of. You get a sense of it, but it's not as much as I think is you need to actually understand why these families why this relationship can never fucking happen. We needed more of that feud. We maybe needed to see it between Philip and, or not Philip, but Alexander and Aaron. We maybe needed to see like a flashback of something that maybe one of the kids had been exposed to, something of that nature, just to kind of see where this feud was at during this time frame. But that's what I thought didn't work on the book. So my final thoughts on this book is I highly recommend this book. yes, if you like historical fiction, especially about founding fathers and women's history, this is a book for you. Please go pick this up if you like either one of those genres, or if you just want a fun fucking read. If you just want a fun one, because it's a good one. It is a good one. And Theodosia's story. I love that I have a story about Theodosia Burr now. I think that is awesome. It's just great. It makes me so happy. It makes me so happy about it. So those are my final thoughts. 4.5 stars. If you liked what you heard, please go check it out. Now, this is the end of the regular review. So if you have not read this book and you continue with this review, please be warned, I'm going to be doing some spoilers, because this is where I'm going to gush and just go fucking hog wild. So grab yourself a drink again, because you might need another one, and let's get talking about this book, because this thing, I have so much stuff to actually gush about. Okay, so my gush, let's go. Historical context and framework. This shit was on point. So being a history major, I had to go actually research this shit myself. I had to know exactly how historically accurate this book was. Oh my fucking God. Excellent. Excellent. Everything I found matched up. I didn't find anything that looked off. The only thing I really couldn't find was the poem. I wanted to find out if Philip actually wrote the poems. I wanted to find that out, and I couldn't find it out. So if you guys know, let me know, because I researched, not hardcore, but I just couldn't find anything about it. Oh my God, just this time frame, the way they described the environment at the time, it just, so fucking spot on and great and awesome. It made me want to live in the 1800s for about half a minute. And then I realized that I don't have air conditioning, and I said, fuck that. So yeah, Theodosia's upbringing and education, being closely aligned with her father, her letters to the father actually happened, and how she strengthened her use of language and rhetoric with those letters. Oh my fucking God. I actually got to read some of the letters. I researched enough that I got to find some of the letters, and yeah, he would critique these fucking letters back to her and say, this is not how you argue this point. You need to argue it better. And he was so stern. He was so in your face about it. But at the same time, she took it and ran with it. She was that girl that you needed to push. And if you pushed her hard enough, she was going to do great things and excel. And I just fucking adore that about women in history. I adore that character. I don't think we talk about those historical female characters enough. Oh my God, I loved it. It was fantastic. Just, so good. Loved it every single second of it. Could not get enough of the fact that this badass woman that actually existed finally gets talked about. I'm so excited. Just so you know, this is what Theodosia Burr looked like. This is the picture I was able to find of her. So if you would like to know, this is what she looked like. Her marriage to Joseph Alton. Spoiler alert, they don't end up together. She ended up marrying Joseph Alton, who was a senator from, I believe, South Carolina. And I love the fact that Lorianne Goldstein used the conjecture of historians to twist this marriage into something epic in this book. This is a major moment in this book, this marriage. And it's just, it pisses you off and it makes you so angry. But the fact that actually, you knew it had to happen because historically, this is who she actually married. So we have to, and Lorianne Goldstein was really good about keeping the actual historical facts in there. But the way she twisted this, I mean, this is historical conjecture that this marriage was arranged because they were suffering from debt. Aaron Burr needed support from the South. It's all conjecture. But this, I feasibly believe that this could happen. I totally do. I totally believe that Aaron Burr, as advanced as he was in wanting to educate his daughter, he still educated her in the fine arts, the sitting all prim and proper and, talking about tea, talking about, poems and shit like that over tea and crumpets. He still resorted to the stereotypical thing of the early 1800s of marrying his daughter for power. She was still a poker chip. And I firmly believe that Aaron Burr was politically minded enough and douchebaggy enough to fucking do this to his daughter. He just gave her a bone and made her fucking smart. So, I love the fact that Goldstein did this and turned it on its head and brought this speculation that historians have had for years to the forefront, because it's completely theoretically possible. It completely is that this whole marriage was arranged. There was no actual love for this romance at all. But Theodosia, being the only daughter of Aaron Burr and being as loyal as she was to her, loyal to him as she was, I mean, the shit she did after, we'll get to that. Yeah, like, that was amazing. I just fucking adored that. I ate that shit up. When I figured that out, because I started researching at that point, I was like, oh, hell no. Yes, she weaved this speculation into this book so well that it was just like, this is history. This is what actually happened now. I can't believe that she didn't actually love him. Like, it was so well weaved. It was so fucking well. So when I say her historical correct framework and how she used the fictional elements with historical, she was on point. She fucking nailed this. Oh my God. I have read a lot of historical fiction and I have not seen it done that well in a long time, especially for a debut novel. A debut. I've seen Philippa Gregory do this countless times. I've seen Diana Gabaldon do this countless times. Excellent. Excellent. Excellent usage of it. Cannot gush enough about that. Philip's education and his personal habits. The historical framework, correct. Again, Philip enrolled in Columbia College where his knowledge and enthusiasm were compared to that of his father, already now an alumnus. He was rumored to be very, very intelligent person, just kind of a aloof. And here is a direct quote from Robert Troup, who was a family friend. And he wrote that Philip was very promising in genius and acquirements, and Hamilton formed high expectations of his future greatness. But he wrote privately, however, that, alas, Philip is a sad rake, and I have serious doubts whether he would ever be an honor to his family or his country. So the character that Philip was given, she had to have seen this quote, because that is spot fucking on. I mean, Robert Troup nailed the character of Philip in this book. So I have a feeling that her depiction of Philip is a lot more accurate than I maybe assumed in the beginning of the book. At the end of the book, we have Philip dying in a duel. And I have to bring this up. I have to talk about this part because it's fantastic. On July 4th of 1801, a New York lawyer named George Ecker gave an Independence Day speech hosted in New York, where he insulted Alexander Hamilton. And Philip, being the loyal eldest son, this loyalty written throughout this book, called him out on it, challenged him to duel. Well, dueling is illegal in New York at this time. And so he challenged him to a duel months later. November 20th, to be exact, 1801, Philip and a friend named Stephen Price encountered Eckert while attending a play at Park Theater. And Philip confronted Eckert about his speech, and then in ensuing disturbance, Eckert was heard to call Philip and Price damned rascals. In response to the verbal hostilities and Eckert's insult, the two formally challenged Eckert to a duel. And it is speculated that Alexander Hamilton counseled his son on how to win the duel. Alexander Hamilton counseled his son on how to win a duel. I want you to remember that. I want you to remember that fact. The duel took place in New Jersey, as dueling was illegal in New York. And ironically, it took place a few miles away from where Alexander Hamilton would die from his own duel injuries. Yeah. Alexander Hamilton was later on in a duel and died from those injuries, and that duel took place a few miles away from where his son died in a duel. You can't write this shit. It actually has to happen. All right. I love that. I thought that was a little interesting tidbit about it. But here's the thing about Philip's death. It is written into this book in the epilogue. And it's here that we find out about the baby. And in the book, the baby is Philip's. So she used this actual event and again successfully manipulated it into the book, twisted the book to be real. And I was just like, fucking brilliant, lady. Fucking brilliant. Oh my God, that was amazing. When I read that, I was in shock and I was crying because I was like so heartbroken. But then I read the history. I was like, whoa, wait, what? What? He actually died in a duel. I didn't know Philip Hamilton had died in a duel. So when I found that out, I was like, oh, he actually did. But then we had the baby. I'm like, oh my God. She literally had the perfect fucking historical setup for this story. She fictionally wrote a romance within an epic fucking story anyway. Like, that's fucking brilliant. That is awesome. I applaud her. I applaud her. A little bit more about Philip's death. He is buried in an unmarked grave near his parents' in Trinity Church. And we do meet other members of the Hamilton family. And so I want to bring up what actually happened to the family. Following Philip's death, his family fell into disarray. His 17-year-old sister, Angelica, who we meet in the book, who is headstrong, who is not as highly educated as Theodosia, but quick-witted and just as strong-willed. She ended up suffering a mental breakdown from which she never recovered, and her mental state deteriorated until she became only intermittently lucid, and she sometimes could not even recognize her own family members. She would spend the rest of her life in a state described as eternal childhood, talking to her long-lost brother, Philip. And the baby that his mother was carrying, Philip's mother was carrying at the time of his death, when he was born, they named him Philip Hamilton, as well as in remembrance of his elder brother. Yeah. Crazy, right? Crazy. Nuts. So, just, when I read that he died in a duel, I was shocked. And so when I researched it, I was like, oh my God, you've got to be shitting me. I kind of wish she would have continued on with the book, so I would have gotten her interpretation of this shit. I was like, oh, like an epilogue. I mean, we have an epilogue, but like an epilogue of like Hamilton's story. Like, like a little novella of this part, her interpretation. Oh, I think that'd be brilliant. 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 The intimate scenes, as I said in the previous part of the video, they were just, they were great. They were great. I'm going to read you a passage of one of them so you actually know, like, what I'm talking about verbiage-wise. Because it's just enough to whet your palate. Just enough. Here we go. The coolness of the dirt beneath her feet spread like the goose flesh through her body and bored deep into her veins until it echoed in her bones and she were one with it, with this place, with the home it was, not for the house or the grounds, but for the one who provided it and for all those living with whom she could not abandon any more than Philip could leave all of whom he held dear. He encased her hand in his, eyes gleaming with determination. I told you, I don't believe in never. I believe in possibilities, and this country, my parents, your own, are all proof of the impossible becoming possible. Even if, when it does, I am old and gray, with a cane and one tooth, I will come for you. Lightness would not ease the tension of the moment, but he would not be the man she loved if he did not try. She looked at him, those long lashes, those gentle lips, those deep brown eyes, full of love and faith and parting. She drew in steadying breath and followed his lead. And I will welcome you. She fought the ravaging of her heart to offer a pinched smile. Our love is pure and strong, and if we believe in it, it will endure. He swallowed audibly, as if stemming a strangled cry. Then she placed her hand on his cheek, a catch of basin for the tears that escaped. She lay with him until his chest rose and fell, with a deep, heavy breaths of sleep. She stayed until across the sky the sun painted the red of that dress she had sewn and worn just for him. Richmond Hill enveloped her. The chirp of the birds that lived in the rustling leaves of the trees above that grew from the soil seeped into her skin, dampened by the mist from the river. She breathed in since before her mother died, and after she made the promise she as a Burr would not break, because now she understood it was as much for her as it was for him. This was the world in which they lived, one of contradictions that led a country to fight for independence, while denying it to all. A husband to claim eternal love for the one to whom he was wed, while bringing another to his bed. A father to invest his every thought and hope into a child except the one the child deserved. She wouldn't be who she was without her father, but she couldn't be who she hoped to become without him. And yet Philip's words of forgiveness and impossibilities took root like the hardiest sapling, budding into the contradiction that even now she knew would consume her heart and mind forevermore. She would never forgive her father, but she would never forgive herself if she didn't try. Gentle as his hand behind a newborn's head, she extracted herself from Philip's embrace. She hovered over him, using all of her strength to resist a brush of her lips against his that would wake for him. For his eyes open and looking to hers, she couldn't do what they both knew they must. She etched his face into memory, and she slipped on her cape. She unfastened her mother's brooch from it and kissed the tortoiseshell whose greens and reds and browns danced in the morning light. She laid it beside his head where she would be sure to see it. And then she grabbed hold of the reins of her horse and guided the mare back to Richmond Hill, where she would say goodbye to this life and begin another. Holy fucking shit. Like, seriously. It's beautiful the way this woman writes. Oh, so beautiful. So beautiful. I don't actually have to gush anymore about it. It's just, oh my God. In that one passage, I felt so much. In those 3 freaking paragraphs, I felt so much. It just, my heart is like pounding right now. Oh, I loved it. I loved it. That was the final scene I read. And it's a beautiful moment in the book. It is. It gives you so much, it gives you hope, at the same time it takes it away from you. It's gut-wrenchingly beautiful, and it's just, it was stunning. This book was fucking beautiful. It was so beautiful. I just love this thing. I loved it. I loved it. I talked about Philip's ending, so I thought it's only fair that I talk about Theodosia's too. Theodosia's real ending. In 1807, Burr was arrested for treason. During his trial in Richmond, Virginia, Alston she was with him. And she provided comfort and support, and she remained by his side for years after that. Aaron Burr was sent into exile, and during his exile, she acted as an agent, raising money, which she sent to him, transmitting messages. She would write to Secretary of Treasury Albert Gallatin and Dolly Madsen in an effort to secure a smooth return for him. It never really worked. Her son actually died of malaria on June 30th, 1812, at the age of 10. And then several months later, she boarded the Patriot ship. And on December 31st, 1812, the Patriot set sail, and it was never heard of again. So this woman's story literally ends in mystery. And that really sucks. that really sucks. But I'm glad that I have this, even though it was fictional, I'm glad that this amazing kick-ass woman got some sort of happiness. And this is one of those stories that it doesn't have a happy ending. It doesn't. But it's okay that it doesn't. And I loved it. I loved it. So that is all I have. That's my gush part of this video. If you stuck with me to the very end, thank you so much. I hope you, if you haven't read this book, I hope I haven't spoiled it too much for you. I mean, it is all historically accurate, so you kind of already know how the story ends, even when you pick it up. But the hope and the love created for this relationship. You want this relationship so bad, but you know it's doomed. Romeo and Juliet was the best retelling for this book because it's a doomed story. But sometimes you want the doomed ones. You need to be reminded that there aren't always happy endings, but it's those moments that you're happy in that define you, not your ending. It's the moments within. So I'm very glad that Theodosia now has a moment, that a romantic happy one, even if it is a false one. But is it? They grew up the same time period in the same city. Who's to say that maybe they didn't have a forbidden romance at one point in time? We don't know. Thanks, guys, for joining me. I hope you enjoy my review of Love, Theodosia by Lori-Ann Goldstein. Go pick it up if you like it. If you like this review, thumbs up, share, the whole 9 yards. Thanks for sticking with me. Bye, guys.